if you add up all the tenants and all the sort of stakeholders in our business, there's a shitload of people that they're way smarter than us, by the way, way smarter than me, and way smarter than Mitch. Welcome to the 0 to 100 podcast. I'm the leader. I'm the CEO of the 0 to 100 podcast. And with me is my virtual assistant, Mitch.
This intro sounds like you're drunk, so I'm not sure if you're the leader.
Well, if I am the leader, we're definitely in trouble. But I did want to say, I want to welcome my intern, my virtual assistant from Sri Lanka. Yeah, he's my intern, Mitchell England.
It's like a Make-A-Wish internship.
I'm going to apologize in advance because there's not Gabe here to moderate us today. We might just insult each other for the next hour. We might talk real estate.
We had a very professional, well-curated podcast with Ken McElroy yesterday. And now you have us. So this is going to be just the diehards who listen to the unprofessional, out of control Mitch and Trav show. So
yeah, all of our professionalism, all of our knowledge, all of our effort bled out yesterday. Now you have shells of us today where we're just stumbling idiots. In fact, I think we had to take 3 because Mitch says, I'm counting down. And then I'm like, oh shit, I think I have something in my teeth. And then Mitch is like, oh no, we're a mess. So here we are. I'm broadcasting from 0 to 100 headquarters live in Hood River, Oregon. And Mitch is probably, again, I don't know where Mitch is. What are you? Are you Wisconsin? You're in Wisconsin now. And
Wisconsin.
Are you in the
RV,
trailer?
yeah.
You're in the trailer. I see trailer.
Still in the RV.
Living our best lives, so to speak. If you want to know what the 0 to 100 podcast is, it's all about real estate, cash flow real estate, buy and hold real estate. It's really about getting your time back through passive income and, living the life you want. I will tell you though, sometimes I feel like a fraud, right? It depends on this, like the season you're in real estate. I mean, I don't want to be completely bullshitting people, but sometimes like we've been busy in real estate. There's, very little time freedom. You've got geographical freedom, but we've been busy. We've been transitioning a lot of our portfolio's management to a great operator. So we have to work hard to work less. Like sometimes you have to sort of like speed up in your business. You have to get a lot of stuff done. You have to check a lot of boxes. And then you have to train and survive through. This is our first month of transitioning most of our mobile home park portfolio. So half of our rents are going to one bank account. The other half are going to another. We're dealing with some legal stuff. It's a lot. And it doesn't feel like time freedom right now at all, at least for me. But maybe it does for Mitch.
No, I agree. I think it's seasons though. And I think it's funny. I was having this conversation the other day with somebody. It's like, look, if you don't want to work hard and you want to have time freedom, then you either just do it right away and be poor, right? Or you work really hard and build systems and processes and people and leverage so that you don't have to work a lot and you have time freedom. But I also think that while you're inside of this game, it's cyclical, like it's seasonal. What was it? Cryos time in 10X is easier than 2X, the book. I love that book, by the way. But like Cryos time is like seasons. There's seasons where you're prepping and you're working or you're relaxing or you're taking time off. So I think that my year is like a seasonal thing. And the seasons can change sometimes, but like you might go through a month or two where you're like, oh my gosh, we're transitioning to new management, which we are right now, which takes up a ton of time. Then you get to the other end of that and you go, oh my gosh, I got all my time back. This is amazing. So it's not perfect every week, but the game is it's funny because even in my busy time, I just told my wife, I said, I think I'm going to have to work 3 full days this week. And she looked at me and she's like, is everything okay? So even in the busiest of times, it's like not that bad. So I'm like, yeah, head down for 3 days for like 6 or 7 hours a day. I'm in the grind. So it's still, you compare it to the W-2 world, you can get so much done. And the really cool thing, I was even thinking about this morning. I woke up really early and I was knocking out a bunch of emails and I'm like, what's so cool in the real estate world is I can put so many people to work without paying them an hourly rate. They're paid per closing, they're paid their performance-based pay, right? So whether that's like, hey, title, can you help me do this? Or Mr. Broker, can you do that? Or I'm putting the seller to work. He doesn't get paid until we close the property, or insurance agents, or whatever that is. So it's one of the only businesses that I can think of where like day one, you have a massive amount of leverage with third-party advisors that are only paid if you close. And so a lot of my time I notice is just telling people what to do or asking for information from people, putting other people to work. So by the time I'm out of my emails and I want to go to the pool with the kids, people know what to go do. So anyway, I'm going in circles here, but I think there's so much leverage in real estate that even when you're really, really busy, you can be still a lot less busy and a lot more free than other folks.
Well, yeah, it's funny that you're mentioning that you send all those emails and you tell everybody what to do. The problem is he's telling me what to do.
That is not true.
I'm like,
That is
bro, what are you leveraging me
that
for?
is-
Like,
that is not
we
true.
missed the point here.
So we try. So
It's like-
early in our relationship, we both tried. We said, "Hey, you should do this," and then he said, "Hey, you should do that," and we both were like, "Hey, we're not going to do that." So it didn't work. Okay.
Well, I owned a company. I had many employees, and that was my life. And I think I tried that. I'm like, hey, Mitch, can you, and he's like looking at me like, no, but you did do that. Look, last thing I'll mention on this piece is there was a text exchange between you, me, and Gabe yesterday. And you're like, oh, of course, Gabe goes, can you send an invite? And my first thought is, why don't you just send an invite, Gabe? Gabe's like also the master of leverage. He's like, and he tries to leverage me. And then Mitch chimes in and goes, Travis can do that.
Well, I just thought about it because you're really good at invites. So I thought, well, why don't I just let him shine?
That's like the only thing I'm good at is sending invites. And I'm not even good at that. Well, I love the topic of leverage. I've talked about leverage a lot throughout, I think in the 0 to 100 book, we've talked about leverage on this podcast. And man, I got to tell you, like, if you're starting from nothing, which most people are, right? And you want to build big things, whether it's businesses or you want to build a big real estate portfolio, man, everything you think about is in the form of leverage. And I remember the first time I was listening, I think I was listening to the Robert Kiyosaki CDs as I was driving my little shitbox Honda, to work. And I'm listening to the Kiyosaki CDs. And he gives a story about the garbage disposal and how like his garbage disposal broke. And he's like, I'm going to be a man, right? Like we fix things, right? I'm going to climb under there and fix this garbage. I'm going to go buy the part. And he like went to the store, got the wrong part 3 times back and forth, maybe to Home Depot. Finally gets the part, his hands are all bloodied. He's trying to install this thing. Nothing worked. Like 4 hours later, he calls the plumber anyway. So now he spent more money because he had to buy the part and he had to pay the plumber and he spent 4 hours. And I remember listening to that going, oh. And so I started using leverage in my life when I had no money. Because a lot of people think, oh, how do you, when I get money, when I finally make it, I'm going to start using leverage. But I think that's something that you have to adopt early. Like instead of saying we, always say, or me, always replace that with who, right? Who can do this thing? And I started, as soon as I could, I got someone cleaning my house. As soon as I could, I got someone, mowing my lawn, because that time's really valuable. And man, we always talk about real estate being the most leverageable asset on earth. Right now, as we're sitting here, we've got hundreds of tenants going to work, paying rent. That's leverage. We've got millions and millions and millions of dollars that we've borrowed. And those dollars are from other people that are depositing their money with banks and going to work, right? That we've borrowed to buy real estate. We've got investors that invest alongside with us. Yes, they're getting a great return on their money, but that's also leverage. And yeah, we have real estate brokers and wholesalers sending us deals. We've got mortgage brokers that are working really hard to refinance properties. We've got, insurance agents that are going out and finding us the best insurance. We've got Coast, who are the badass management team that's taken over all of our properties and answering all the calls from our caretakers and our residents. There's if you add up all the tenants and all the sort of stakeholders in our business, there's a shitload of people that they're way smarter than us, by the way. Way smarter than me and way smarter than Mitch. And
I agree. I agree.
How could two dumbasses sit here metaphorically smack each other in the face and make dumb jokes while you've got all these smart people out there working for us? And that is why I like real estate. So I'd encourage all the listeners, what leverage can I do today? How can I slowly get shit off my plate? Sorry, go ahead, Mitch.
It's so true. And it's just, most businesses, you need to hire a staff and multiple people. And it's, there's a heavy sort of monthly, burn to get started. It's such a unique business because a very limited core team can influence a lot of properties, own a lot of properties or pieces of properties, and have people who are paid per performance working all over the country without having all of the risk of a lot of staff. And I'm not we've hired people and had people in this business as well as in my past life, other businesses. I don't want employees. I feel like employees, the more employees, I think the more problems. I'd rather have systems and software and then third-party advisors that either perform or don't. And you can, it's easy to let them go versus a lot of employees. So I think the model is really, really awesome.
Yeah, I could speak from experience. I mean, employees can be awesome or they can be the bane of your existence. And I would say like a lot of the challenges we've had in our business have been due to employees. Like, whatever that is though, whether it's employees, because obviously, at least where we live in Oregon, like landlord laws, employers have no rights at all. Like when with my business, we had employees across 14 states. And if we had the opportunity to hire somebody like in California or Oregon, like we treaded lightly, because once you hire somebody, it's like once you get a tenant in one of your properties in these states, you lose all your rights because you're a dirty, dirty capitalist pig and you should suffer in these states. But it is nice not having employees because you can part ways with them very easily. And I'd say real estate is probably like one of the top businesses that allow you to do that, because you can have people that work for you that only get paid, like Mitch said, when they succeed, when they do something right. And you can partner with people that are not necessarily your employees. So for those of you, and I'll ask the live audience here, have you researched the Big Beautiful Bill and what this means for real estate investors? There's a lot of controversy over this bill. So the Big Beautiful Bill, I'm asking people in the live audience, what does this mean? Like, what's the number one positive that comes out of this? Again, this is a very controversial bill. This is what led to the breakup of the bromance between Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Elon Musk felt like the bill was putting the country into much more of a deficit, which if we're talking politics here, I do agree. Like, at some point, this country has to be treated like a business or a household. At some point, we have to stop printing money and stop borrowing money, or the debt in the system is going to be like artery or plaque in arteries, and the whole system is going to freeze up. I don't know how that thing plays out. We're on a rat wheel. We keep printing money. The train going down the tracks, but I don't know if this train's going to have brakes at some point. However, this is a real estate podcast. This is not a Travis political discussion. Everybody's saying bonus depreciation. I'm going to tell you, bonus depreciation, in my mind, is one of the more powerful elements of the Big Beautiful Bill. Bonus depreciation is like this. I'll try and explain this for some of our listeners that might not quite understand it. People oftentimes think of depreciation as something that goes down in value. And yes, that is essentially the definition of depreciation, whereas appreciation is when something goes up in value. And generally speaking, especially if you're a novice real estate investor, you think that appreciation is something you shoot for and depreciation is something that you avoid. Yes, don't buy a piece of property that's going to go down in value. For example, we just got sent a property in Flint, Michigan. And if you Google Flint, Michigan, you'll probably see that people are leaving that place in droves because they've had water quality issues. And sorry, if you're in Flint, I apologize in advance. It just kind of sounds like a giant shithole. But I would say that properties in Flint, Michigan go down in value. But how do you leverage bonus depreciation? Depreciation, as the IRS defines it, it allows you to take improvements. So when you think of a piece of real estate, you've got land, and on that land, you've got improvements, which is the building. In our case, for manufactured housing communities, it could be the pipes in the ground, the electrical pedestals, the infrastructure. You have private utilities, wells, things like that. That's infrastructure, right? The IRS basically says everything has a useful life. Right. So I'll take an apartment building, for example, and I don't know, I'm just winging this here. So I don't know off the top of my hand, or top of my head, but maybe like countertops have a 10-year life, floors have a 5-year life or a 10-year life. Those fixtures have different life cycles. And with bonus depreciation, you do what's called a cost segregation study. And, they bring in sort of a tax focused, like engineering-esque type firm that come in and look at basically like, how is this property set up? Okay, maybe it was $1 million property, and maybe the land is 25% of that, and maybe the improvement is like 75% of that. So they go, okay, $750,000 is like the bricks and sticks, the wiring, the building itself, roofs, gutters, those sorts of things. And then of that, they break all those components out into the different components that have different life cycles. And so bonus depreciation, when it came out under Trump's initial bill, they basically said you can go and you can take, I think it was like everything that has like a 5, 10, or 15-year life, and people are going to listen to this and correct me because I'm wrong and they're right. That's not the point. The point I'm trying to make is they look at the pieces that have the shorter life and they say, look, we're going to let you, normally they would say, okay, you can depreciate. Well, first of all, the easiest way of doing it would be you can just take this apartment building, take that $750,000 and depreciate the improvements over 27 and a half years or 39 years, depending on the type of asset it is, straight line it across. So for the next 27 and a half years, I'm going to divide that $750,000 and I'm going to be able to take that much loss on my taxes every year. Well, are you losing money? Is the building going down in value? No, I mean, generally speaking, if you buy real estate, right, it's not going down in value. It's going up in value. It's either, it's in an area that's values are going up because people are moving there and jobs are moving there. Or like what we do is you just buy properties, and even if they're plain Jane boring areas, you have the ability to increase the net operating income, increase the profitability, which increases the value. So if you're doing the thing right, you're doing the real estate investing right, the value of all this property is going up in value. But the IRS is saying I can actually take that loss over 27 and a half years. So that's pretty cool because that's a paper loss. It's a bullshit loss. It's a fake loss, essentially, or a phantom loss. But then when you can sort of accelerate that depreciation with bonus depreciation, you could say, okay, I'm going to take everything that has this short life span and I'm going to depreciate it all in the first year. That would be 100% bonus depreciation. And the tax bill that came out under Trump basically allowed you to do that. And then I think the next year, so you can take those short life materials, 100% bonus depreciation. So you could buy a piece of property using leverage, put a down payment, right? Borrow money from the bank, but you could depreciate and get a tax benefit that was greater than the down payment, which was crazy, right? Now, depreciation is essentially reducing the income. It's not a tax credit, and it allows you to bonus depreciate. And then I think the next year was like 80%. Then I think that went down to 60. And I think last year it went down quite a bit. And so if we had had a Democrat elected office, that probably would have, my CPA said, I don't think it would have gone away. Generally, there's been some element of it for years, but it certainly would have gone back up to 100%. So the big, beautiful bill comes along and we get 100% bonus depreciation now, which that means you could sell one property. Let's say we have one property that we want to exit this year because it's sort of at the top of the rents. We've sort of maxed out what we call the forced depreciation, the value add improvements. And so we've increased the value a ton, but there's not a lot more value to go. And so our cash on equity is pretty low. We're under 50% levered. It's time to sell that property. Well, we can sell that property and now we can go buy the next property and do 100% bonus depreciation. And we can offset the gains that we made on the first property. And that's the thing. A lot of people think, well, they have to do these 1031 exchanges, these tax deferred exchanges. Well, 1031 tax deferred exchange is another really cool tax strategy that allows you to basically sell one property, take the equity that you had in that property, and you place it with an intermediate company, a 1031 facilitator, and then you go buy another property. And then as long as that property is equal or greater value and the debt's equal or greater value, you can move it into another property. And a lot of people do that because they might have maxed out the benefits on one side, the initial property. So the last thing I was going to say, I have to finish this talk about the bonus depreciation thing. So bonus depreciation is back. What's nice about this, though, is that 1031 exchange that I was talking about, you've got a time limit on it, right? You have 45 days to identify property. You have 180 days to close on property. 1031 exchanges usually make people make bad investment decisions. In fact, if I'm selling and someone's a 1031 exchanger, I love that because they're so fixated on not paying taxes for this particular transaction or paying taxes on the capital gains. Sometimes they'll make a bad investment decision, almost to the point where I sold a property. I'm like, damn, man, you overpaid considerably. So a lot of times with bonus depreciation, you don't have to worry about a 1031 exchange because I can just take the capital gains on one and then I can take the bonus depreciation on the next. Don't do the 1031 exchange. Obviously, if you can do both at the same time and you can stack those strategies, which I believe is illegal, I think you can stack both bonus depreciation and 1031 exchange, which is really powerful because then you're not paying the capital gains on one and you're also taking the bonus depreciation on the next. I'd say it's not paying taxes. I do want to make sure that people understand that with the 1031 exchange or with taking bonus depreciation, you're kicking the tax can down the road. You're mitigating taxes, right? So at the end of the day, at some point, if you were to 1031 your whole life and just mitigate taxes, eventually a tax bill will come due and you're going to have to pay all the capital gains from the very first day. Or with bonus depreciation, you have to pay what's called depreciation recapture. Like if you go sell that property. So if you take massive bonus depreciation, if you go sell that property, you're going to have to pay depreciation recapture, which can be really, really painful. I've had to do it. And so just be wary of that. I think people use these strategies, smart investors use these strategies, they understand it, and they understand that, the implications of recapture. So now if you had a bunch of recapture to pay and you were able to 1031 that into the next property, away you go. And you save the tax bill for another day. So I think bonus depreciation is one of the biggest benefits. The last thing I'll say is that usually passive losses off of real estate is oftentimes, if you're not a real estate investment professional, then usually the soft losses, the depreciation losses only offset, so that would be considered a passive loss, that only offsets passive income. So if you're like a surgeon, right, or a doctor, and you're getting a ton of income off of real estate, which is great, by the way. Maybe you're a limited partner in a bunch of deals. You're getting all this passive loss. It's only going against your passive income, right? Now, me and Mitch, because we're real estate professionals and using our names and the word professional in the same sentence, again, it's kind of a joke. Because we're doing that, that allows us to take essentially the depreciation losses are essentially active losses. And so we can offset our active income. And my wife's a real estate agent. So like we are true, like if the IRS came and asked and did a litmus test, like, are you guys actual real estate professionals? The answer is absolutely yes, because that's all we do. We have a real estate podcast. We have a book. We have a portfolio. We have an investment, boutique sort of real estate investment company. Like that's what we do. So be careful, because if you're a surgeon or you're a CPA or whatever the case is, and you try and tell the IRS, CPA wouldn't do this because they're smarter than that, but you try and tell the IRS that you're a real estate professional and they looked at you, you work 50 hours a week at this like other job. Bullshit. You can't take that loss.
I think the tax conversation is interesting. Also, think about, when it comes to taxes, all of that can be basically dodged or never paid via refinances. And when you look at the richest of the rich take out loans against their equity. It's not just a real estate thing. You look at the Warren Buffetts of the world, Bezos, Steve Jobs, like they're able to take debt that's tax-free against equity. And in real estate, what's interesting is when you do it correctly and you keep that solid DSCR, debt service coverage ratio, then you do it in a way that's safe where tenants pay for that debt. So I think that's a way that, if you're trying to build generational wealth and pass to your kids and your kids' kids, if that's your goal, your family could hold real estate theoretically forever and consistently take returns via monthly checks, as well as put responsible debt against that real estate and never have a tax burden. So don't forget about that piece.
Yeah, I mean, even like people, when they hear like Elon Musk bought Twitter, and they're like, man, he just like cashed out all his stock. And a lot of these guys don't do that. They borrow even against their equity portfolio. And because debt, if he goes to cash out his stock, he's now has a capital gains event. So, and why? Because the bankers run the country. So, and they do. Bankers and some of these big players that all these benefit, they're the ones that help write the rules, man. And like Kiyosaki says, you can whine about it and complain that the rich are getting richer and there's all these loopholes in taxes, and you can complain about it, or you can just realize there's nothing you can do. Like Kiyosaki says, he who has the money writes the rules. I'm talking like big money, not like massive amounts of money, like Blackstone and Elon Musk. But you certainly can play along with the rules. You can do that. Or if you don't want to because you feel bad about it, then, go pay half your income in taxes and you feel good about it.
We had this conversation yesterday talking about the rules are written a certain way. We don't necessarily have influence over the rules, right? But we have the option on how to play the game. And so when you look at our country, the printing of capital, whether it's the left or the right, doesn't matter where you are politically, both parties do it. The Federal Reserve prints at different rates depending on what's going on. If there's a big event like COVID or, a housing crisis or whatever, maybe the printer is turned up. If it's steady Eddie, the printer's always going. Their target is 2.5 to 3%, somewhere in there, maybe 2.8%. I can't remember the exact inflation target, but the concept is they're consistently printing money, which means that assets are consistently inflated. We actually worked the numbers one time. I'm not going to do it now, but where it's like inflation at 3 or 4 or 5%, if you're adjusting on your property, and even if expenses are following, you're still making multiples on your cash. In other words, the property's still going up in value at a rate that's greater than the inflation. So the way our country works is if inflation exists, asset owners consistently get richer. And I didn't write the rules. We didn't write the rules, right? But that's the way it works. So I think there's this like, we have to realize here's how the game works. Here are the rules of the game. How do we best navigate that for our families? And I don't always agree with the rules or agree with the way it works or agree the fact that they deflate the dollar, and print more. I don't agree with it, but yet I know that they do. So what game are you going to play and how are you going to protect your family and grow your wealth and not be a part of that? Like, unfortunately, the middle class, a lot of professionals, a lot of people who work really hard, teachers, firemen, a lot of public workers are really getting hurt right now because inflation, they say, was at 8% and prices basically doubled over the last 3 or 4 years. People are really, really hurting. And it's just going to get worse as the government continues to print capital, in my opinion, at least. I mean, that's one prediction I'll stand by. It's like the value of the dollar is not going to all of a sudden start going up, maybe on the day to day, but like over time, the erosion of the dollar is a thing that we've done in our country for 100 years.
Oh, hell no. And sometimes that, the conspiracy theorist in me says it's by design that, because like you just said, the rich get richer when their asset values go up, not just real estate assets, but if they're holding stock in a company, that company is raising its prices, right? It's going up, but real estate's cool because you can't leverage buying, shares of Tesla. If you're going to buy 1,000 shares or $1,000 worth of Tesla stock, you get $1,000 worth of Tesla stock. With real estate, you take this sort of money printing, devaluing of the dollar situation, which benefits asset holders, and then you put debt on that. And then you multiply your returns. And I think that's what Mitch is saying. You're multiplying. I mean, people think about using debt to multiply your cash flow, which is absolutely true. But 100%, leveraging the appreciation, because I can go buy, a $10 million asset its value is going to increase every single year with a $2.5 million down payment, most likely, or I can have the seller carry a note. Maybe I put less, or I can raise capital for that down payment through investors. So yeah, a lot of tools that are available to you for that.
And we're always talking about these deals where even our singles, I think, are home run deals when it comes to like real estate investors, as like the deals we talk about. Like, we have a lot of forced appreciation, we have good cash on cash, we have good fundamentals, but you could probably take an average deal and apply a 3 to 5% inflation on the top line revenue and on the expenses and map it out over the next 20 or 30 years and pair that with debt pay down and tax benefits. And it's like a smoking good deal when it comes to like, maybe not when it comes to like, cherry picking awesome deals, but when it comes to like where to put your money, real estate just has such a headwind or a tailwind behind, I should say. And so it's just an interesting, and then when you really get good at this game, you start really pushing the envelope, analyzing deals, like really, really trying to understand all the fundamentals, the DSCR, the cash on cash, the IRR, the how much you can force appreciate it. Now you take a really good asset class and you just like 10x it. And so anyway, it's interesting. I love for, if you're listening to this and you're looking for something to do, go run numbers and just run, say, 3 to 5% inflation on the top line and the expenses and divide that over a 7 cap over, say, 20 years. And what does that mean for your property? You're still creating wealth. You're still paying down debt. You're still winning in a big way compared to other alternative assets.
I was going to say, and then apply some leverage to that. I love leverage. I've used leverage my whole life. When I started my first company, bought my first house, I've always borrowed money for it. Primarily because I had no money. So I had to, but even like I say, the wealthy use leverage. And Sean did remind us that you can leverage your stocks. And I was mentioning that earlier. Yeah, you can borrow against your stocks. And then he says, and you can take that and go invest it in real estate. I would say like, and we were talking about that. We talk about this all the time with each other. And we were talking about this with Ken McElroy yesterday. You just got to hold on to the asset. A lot of times, because we've been through a tough time. We have some properties that are sucking wind right now. In fact, some of them we're having to feed a little bit. Really one specifically. But if you've got, for the most part, if your portfolio has good cash flow, the profit of the properties cover your debt service with a nice buffer, even maybe your cash flow goes down, maybe you're taking no distributions, maybe you have to kick the can down the road on investing a lot more CapEx into those properties. But man, the name of the game is hold properties. You got to hold stuff. And if you can hold stuff, then you're great. Like when Mitch and I first started buying mobile home parks, we stress test these things. We're like, what happens if like we lose half our tenants. What happens if we lose half our revenue? Which, by the way, that was before COVID. So it's a good thing we did that, because we were staring down it looked like a barrel of a gun when the government was telling our tenants, don't worry about paying these guys. They'll be fine. But we stress test the hell out of these things. And we're like, okay, this is great. We could lose half our tenants. If we get in and execute on our value add plan, move rents closer to where they need to, we make sure we have enough cash flow buffer. We have a good loan to value. Going into the deal, we want to make sure that we're buying right. We're putting proper responsible debt on it. So now when rates have doubled and people are shitting the bed and their loans are coming due and times are tough, like Mitch and I are just sitting back saying, yeah, all of our properties are under 50% levered. We've got plenty of cash flow. We're not stressing out because we did this thing right and we were really conservative. And this goes into sort of my next topic. There were a lot of people that didn't. There were a lot of, I don't want to sound like an old, it's been 84 years. I don't want to sound like an old guy here, but like a lot of young guys are out being syndicators. They're like, oh, I just read Joe Fairless' book. I'm going to be a syndicator. And all you saw for like years in the run up was just these assholes going to the bank, closing on another 200 units, 500 units. Look at me. And selling courses and all the guru bullshit. And we do that. Like we have a podcast and elite mastermind and stuff, but these guys were like all over social media. They were kicking ass, but nobody ever really asked about the fundamentals of the deal. They was like, took down 200 doors, 300 doors, 400 doors. And people like, how does this 6-year-old, how was he doing this? Well, it's because he was raising capital and there was so much money in the system. People were just throwing, it was just dumb money. They were just throwing money everywhere.
Well, I remember early on talking, I don't know if it was at a mastermind or one of the trips we've been on. And I was talking to somebody, a bigger name in the space, and we were talking about the concept of having a large team attached to a syndication company with a large team. And I'll tell you, like, if you're a passive investor, watch out for syndication groups that have large teams. And I'll tell you why. They have a monthly, they have to pay salary, right? They have a team that they need to support. What does that mean? They need to consistently close deals. And the way that they get paid is asset management fees and mainly acquisition fees. A lot of these guys are closing deals and funding their company with acquisition fees. Now, acquisition fees, we take acquisition fees. Acquisition fees by themselves are not bad. They're neutral, right? It can be good or bad. But basically, if you're using that out of necessity to pay your team and not lay people off, then you could be, and it happened a lot in the last couple of years, you could be taking down deals to take down deals and keep your team afloat. So when you go invest with a syndication group, I would also look at the size of their team. What do they need to support their team, right, monthly? And how do they support the team? Is it off of cash flow distributions that they're supported? Or is it off of acquisition fees? If it's off of acquisition fees, their interest could be, you could question whether their interests are aligned.
Yeah, let's talk about that. There's probably listeners that want to invest passively with people. There's probably listeners that want to be syndicators. They want to be capital raisers and they want to do the thing. I'll tell you, because I got burned. I put some money with like Mitch has said, how do they get paid? Because whenever you want to find out how people are going to act in a business transaction or in a business relationship, tie it back to how they're getting paid. Right. It's even, I've always had a problem with like property managers. They get paid off top line revenue. They could give two shits about expenses, right? They could care less about how profitable the property is, generally speaking, right? Or somebody like selling life insurance, or there's been plenty of financial advisors. How do they get paid? Well, they get paid based on maybe certain stocks they put you in because they get a bigger commission. That's where they're going to put you. They could give two shits how your stocks perform, or they get paid based on assets under management. And we know people that have a lot of assets under management. Some people are great. They really do care about their clients and they're putting their money where they feel, it should be. Others are just like, they're salespeople. How can I go get more assets under management? And then they just go put you in an index fund and charge you 1%. Going back to the how do people get paid? So when you're looking at these syndicators, you're right. Are they charging 3-4% acquisition fees? Are they charging 2-4% refinance fees? Their asset management fees tied to the top line revenue? Nowhere in any of those fee structures are people getting paid to make the property profitable. And we have a little bit different. When Mitch and I raise capital, the bulk of how we get paid is tied to actual cash flow distributions, because that's the whole point. Like, our investors want to get cash flow. We want cash flow. when we make these when we put good debt on it, structure it the right way, we raise rents, reduce expenses, make these things more profitable. Obviously, we make more money on a month-to-month cash flow basis. So do our investors. Also, our equity multiples go up. We actually increase the value of the property. So I would argue that the way we get paid is tied to the actual profitability of the property. So when you're doing diligence on these guys, look at that. Like, how are they getting paid? Also, look at their track record. I mean, Mitch, I was thinking about this the other day. Like, we have gone, I mean, I'm a little older than you, not much at all.
A couple decades.
I look younger than Mitch. I'm a couple years older than him. But I'll tell you this, like, I've seen so many greed cycles in my short life, starting with like the .com area, just these guys, like just dumb money going at these online companies. Obviously, we saw the '08 crash. All of that was fueled by greed. These mortgage lenders that were just packaging up these loans to unqualified people, selling them off. And then it's like everybody thinks they learned their lesson. They're like, oh gosh, never again. Like, if it's too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. Like, this white hot, market just can't keep happening. And then people forget. Everybody gets amnesia really fast. Damn it, including me. It happened to me, right? And then things go white hot again. They start getting faster and faster. Rates are crazy low. In 2012, 13, 14, everybody looks like a winner. Everybody looks smart, and there's all these young guys that are like, man, they're just kicking ass and they're making money for everybody and they're making money. And then this happens. And then you have something like a black swan event. You have COVID, you have the feds that I think reacted way too effing slow. I'm like, at first I can understand why rates are low, but they just kept rates low too long. And then they knee jerked the system, shocked the system. And here we are. And a lot of these syndicators are falling off a cliff now. Their loans are coming due. They signed up for variable rate debt, bridge debt, and they're in trouble. Like, there's a lot more blood to hit the streets, especially in multifamily syndication.
But also the sad part about this story is the LPs hold the bag in a lot of cases, especially when there's not personal guarantees on the larger sort of Fannie Freddie debt. Like, in other words, like the LPs are the one, they lose their equity first and it happens fast. And so I think when you're an LP, whether you're an operator or you're just a straight limited partner and you're looking for passive investments, know the fundamentals of the deal and really look back. I love how you said, look at your track record. Travis and I, because we have a light team, we don't have to go close deals to support the business. We're not sitting here paying for 10 people, 15 people, analysts and deal finders, all these people. We can go a long time without closing deals. I think we went 14 months was the longest time that we went without closing a deal. During that time, a lot of other people were closing deals because they had to support the team. They had to bring in those deals. So another thing to look for is go back in time and look at some of the deals they closed during the time right after, for example, interest rates rose, right, really fast and prices were still high. People have gotten themselves in trouble not only during that period, but also underwriting properties at a 3-4% interest rate. And then, of course, rates blow up. So I go back to this team thing because can it work? Yeah, it can work. But really understand, is the syndication group, and ask yourself this question as well. If you're an operator, are you playing a game of investor where you go find great deals and you're buying them via fundamentals, or are you a deal closer? Because if you're just looking for deals and you're a deal junkie, that spells trouble in my mind. That you're treating your investment company like a sales organization. And that's cool in a run up, right? It works for a while, but the party ends, right? And so you got to figure out, whether you're an operator or you're an investor, what game are you playing? And I think as an investor, in the end, if you're an LP, your money's on the line. So understand the fundamentals of the deal and understand the group that you're investing with and understand their track record and understand how they behave in different market cycles.
I mean, if they haven't behaved in different market cycles, and that's fine. I think when we started raising capital, it was in the run up. But I think we had some other, we had been investing in real estate. I mean, Mitch was investing in real estate, I think, when he was, I think you sold a motorcycle and borrowed against your student loans and did some dumb, nefarious shit to buy your first real estate asset. I bought my first real estate asset in 2000. So, and we had businesses, like Mitch had done some flips, he had some duplexes, we definitely had some stuff under our belt. I'd also say, when Mitch is saying LPs, talking limited partners, a lot of proper syndications is you have limited partners that for the most part, they're the capital providers. and they're the ones that usually get preferred returns, but they don't really have any say in the management, which puts them at risk a little bit. Like they're trusting the general partners or the GPs, which are the ones that are usually signing on the debt, the ones that are operating the assets, that are making hiring, firing decisions. They're the ones underwriting it, et cetera, et cetera. But LPs are kind of like, you got to trust where you're putting your money in. And I would say other things that you should do is underwrite the asset yourself. And, like absolutely underwrite the asset. Understand when they're sending you this, like understand what you're looking at. When they send you a pro forma, is it too rosy? By the way, and I'll get into some of the problems that some of these syndicators are facing with the SEC in a second. But look at the pro forma, like you're going to get 48% IRR, and you're gonna get 300% of your capital back in 12 months, and all this shit. If it's too good to be true, most likely is absolutely too good to be true. And it's your responsibility to underwrite the asset. Like, okay, and this is where I went wrong. Okay, I trusted these guys. Okay, I guess they know they're multifamily guys. Well, they didn't know what the hell they were doing at all. You look at it and you're like, okay, well, what's the asset? Oh, it's workforce housing. It's C-class housing, or it's B-class housing. It's in this specific neighborhood. It's a B asset in an A neighborhood. It's A asset in a C neighborhood. Like, what does that look like? Understand the location. Like, what city is this in? Are people moving there? Are there jobs? Are people leaving? And then the submarket. That's one thing I realized with these properties I invested in Oklahoma City. Like, I'm into this stuff going, oh yeah, this is a rough area. Like, this is a shitty ass area. I wouldn't live here.
Oh, Ken McElroy said it yesterday, and I followed Ken. If you haven't followed him, go look him up on YouTube and follow some of his videos. He's given some really great speeches and podcasts and talks. And he was talking about, like, people love to just simplify real estate and be like, oh, the real estate market. But in reality, it's hundreds or thousands of submarkets. And then even inside a submarket, you could have several markets inside of a market. Travis and I, when we first started, we went to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We were looking at some apartments out there. And I remember we were like both blown away. You cross the freeway from the east side to the west side, and it's like you go from a nice neighborhood to like a refugee camp. I mean, it's not that bad, but it's literally separated by a freeway. And you could easily say, oh, well, Milwaukee is growing and the population's great and blah, blah. And you could simplify that and say, oh, the Milwaukee market is doing this. When in reality, you cross a freeway and it's extremely different demographic, different infrastructure, different tax structure. The roads have potholes on one side and don't on the other. There's garbage everywhere on one side and don't on the other. The crime rates are super high on one side and aren't on the other. I mean, these are just, so you got to realize, like, real estate is made up of thousands of submarkets and then several markets inside of a market. And this is why when we go tour properties, we always start with really understanding, like, the surrounding area, not only like digitally, right? First digitally, because we want to understand it as much as we can before we go up there, but also circling the area and looking for, like, are there boarded up buildings? Are people maintaining their yards, or is it overgrown grass and mail in the yard? What does the local commercial corridor look like? Is it thriving and businesses are open and people are parked in front of businesses and doing commerce, or is it broken? We've actually, remember the Texas property, Trav? We literally the downtown corridor was all burned out and closed up. We're like, all right, well, obviously this submarket or the market inside a market is broken. And so we didn't go forward on that. The last Texas property, actually we're in contract now, the submarket looks amazing. There's just tons of work. There's tons of jobs. It's healthy. There's a lot of movement. There's renovations happening. So understand, real estate's not just one market or several markets. It's thousands of markets and markets inside of each area that you go look.
I coined a phrase that I made up, and it was called, in real estate, it says location, location, location. And so
no, you didn't. If you did coin that, then you truly are the age that you look, by the way. So
yeah. I guess to kind of wrap up the syndicator thing, I mean, because people are some of these syndicators are getting in trouble. In fact, I think there's some of them might go to jail, which I hope they do. Because I think some of these people, nothing pisses me off more than people that raise capital and have zero regard for the capital that they're raising, including some of these assholes that I invested with. And again, I'm the one that made the investment. That was me. Buck stops with me. Other things that you have to think about, though, do they have money in the deal? Did they put their own money in the deal? Not $30, but do they have a decent amount of did they have a decent amount of money in the deal, right? That's really important, right? because again, it goes back to where are their interests aligned. If they've got their own hard-earned money in the deal, then that's a good sign. Also, like, what kind of debt are they putting on the deal? Like, is it a bridge loan that's variable rate that's going to expire in 24 months? Like, because debt can make or break a deal. And debt is what's breaking a lot of these guys. Like you said, they were underwriting it. Again, too rosy. I remember I argued with this guy. I'm like, well, I knew rates were kind of they're going to be heading north because they were super low. And I'm like, you're telling me that I think at the end of 24 months, this bridge loan, or 36 months, the rate's only going to be at like 4.5%. He's like, yeah, it's at 4 now, but I wanted to be conservative, so I put it at 4.5%. And I was like, man, that doesn't sound right. And sure enough, 4 to 8, right? 4 to 8%. That's a lot different than 4 to 4.5%. So again, like, I like people that are conservative. I like people that under promise and over deliver. How do they communicate? I don't know how many of these guys that when the group we're in, like Go Abundance, we're in these different groups. I don't know how many of these guys that were like the darlings. They were leading the calls and teaching people how to underwrite deals, right? There's a guy that was running classes on how to teach other sophisticated real estate investors how to underwrite commercial real estate because, I'm here to help you. And that guy lost all his LP's money. He was doing hotel developments, like lost them all. Probably a nice guy, but like, what the hell, right? So, and these guys were like the darlings. They were great. And now I don't know, like, how many of them just stopped communicating. Like, we know a lot of people that have been putting money with these guys and they're like, I can't get them to text me back. I can't get them to call me back. There's no distributions. There's no monthly updates. There's no quarterly update. There's nothing. These people just crawled under their desk and hid, and they're still hiding. And I don't know how this thing's going to pan out, but I think a lot of these people hopefully get sued. I mean, there's got to be some karma. There's got to be some repercussion. But yeah, be smart. Also, I think the SEC is starting to, there's some crackdowns. SEC's coming in and lighting people up that didn't file proper syndications or form these things improperly. And this is I'm trying to be vulnerable here. I'm a dumbass. I did this. I invested with these guys. It was like 10 investors. We weren't operating anything. We were just LPs, but it was a JV. The whole deal was a joint venture. There was because they were too cheap and too lazy to do a proper syndication. We have limited partners, you have general partners, you have subscription, the subscription packets, you have the offering memorandum, the OPM, the offering placement memorandum. That's what I meant to say. Like, do it right. Hire an attorney. Make sure you have the right structure. And my God, when you you take $1 from somebody else, that dollar is way more important than any dollar you will ever own. And that's how you need to look at these syndicators. Although I think a lot of these syndicators are going to disappear.
Well, I do too, because I think the syndication model can be played in a way that's responsible. And it's a great model. I love the syndication model. Pooling other people's resources to go chase awesome returns and everybody wins is a great thing. But you just tweak that a little bit and you get too rosy and you get too speculative, or you're fraudulent. There's fraudulent players out there too. There's people that make mistakes and own those mistakes, or the market changes and it's something that's unpredictable. There's always risk involved in real estate, so things can go sideways. But then there's also fraudulent players. There's players that are purposely ripping you off, that are purposely nefarious. And so, I think as an operator, and a lot of people, listening to this show, I think want to be operators, realize that no matter how hard it gets, first of all, keep an open line of communication. Also, have cash on the sidelines to weather storms, because if you need to go in and fix something that you didn't see coming, have cash on the sidelines to weather that, and treat other people's money more important than your own. I've said it before, I own some Bitcoin. I would never put an investor's money in Bitcoin or something speculative like Bitcoin. In a lot of these investments, I think probably equaled speculation with like crypto. A hotel development, for example, where you are basically relying on the pro forma to perform exactly how you thought, is a very speculative investment in my mind. As far as we're concerned, we're cash flow investors. So yeah, I mean, you got to be, if you're an operator, you need to really think hard on how you're going to approach the market in a way that's responsible. How are you going to take people's money in a responsible way? And also, like Trav said, the last piece is, as an operator, or if you're an LP, make sure that the operator's money's in the deal. That we always put money in our own deals because we believe in them. Also, we want our interests aligned. I know if I have money in the deal, like that deal's gonna keep me up at night. I'm gonna make that. Travis says all the time, I'll chew my arm off to make this thing work. And it's different if there's no money in the deal. The operators are not aligned if there's no money in the deal. So that's another important piece.
Well, especially these syndicators that did non-recourse debt, agency debt, and they raised 100% of all the capital, but none of their own money in it. And they already got paid in all their fees, their asset acquisition, asset management fees, their project management fees, all their bullshit fees. They don't care if the deal goes away. You lose your money, right? And there's another thing. Maybe don't put all your eggs in one basket, spread it out, right? Put a little here, like spread it out across. These are, and yeah, there's a lot we could go on and on. So Mitch, I know we're a little late, but you're futzing around with your technology, making a complete ass out of yourself. We don't have a guest on, so there's a couple of questions I wanted to ask you before we get out of here. Our elites, they get to talk to us in our elite mastermind. They get to talk to us for the next couple of hours, so they're in no hurry to talk to us probably. I mean, I don't know, maybe they are. Let's talk about some predictions. I want to hear what your predictions are, and then I'm going to write them down. And if you're wrong, I'm going to berate you. So what do you think is that going to happen with interest rates? What do you think? I'm talking about like the type of loans that we need, right? Usually it's backed by the treasuries. It's not necessarily backed by the overnight Fed rate, which is what people have. There's a misconception. Like, where do you think rates are going to come? I think residential, what are residential rates? Resi rates right now are like in the high sixes, low sevens, 30-year fixed rate mortgages. I'm seeing we just refinanced, actually right in there, 6.6 on a mobile home park, 6 on a 25-year AM, 5-year note. I think we're getting quotes. We closed on those 2-part mobile home parks last year. We were like at 7. So like, I think it's interesting. A lot of these are the rates we're experiencing with these manufacturing housing communities sort of fall in line with what you're seeing on like 30-year fixed. Where do you see rates by the end of the year? And where do you see rates by the end of 2026? This is getting recorded July 15th, my son's birthday, 2025. Don't be wrong. Go.
Yeah, I hate predicting because I think that most likely I'll be wrong, and Travis will agree with that, I'm sure. But I think that it's an interesting dynamic. I just read a report that inflation actually ticked up this last month. There's certain prices, and that's attributed to numerous things, including tariffs potentially. So you have inflation potentially ticking up a little bit, moving up, which would say that rates hold steady or increase. I don't know if that's the case. I think there's a lot of pressure on Jerome Powell. Also, though, he's not going to be there forever. I think it's May of next year that Trump will put a new chair.
Well, I was also reading rumors that maybe he might be stepping down, but I don't know. I don't know if that could.
I don't know about that, but I mean, if we get somebody in that's sort of a loyalist to the current administration, you got to remember you have a president that is real estate forward. So there's a potential that regardless of inflation and the data that we see rates decrease. If I had to guess, we're going to see somebody come in and replace Jerome Powell, and we're going to see rates tick down. I don't think it's going to be massive decreases, but if I had to guess in a year from now, rates are going to go down maybe in the late 5s is probably my guess. But that's not like based on data. That's more based on like the administration's push for lower rates because we have a real estate president.
Well, let's say they put a dovish, head of the Fed, right? Like, as far as I know, that's not like the person that makes the decision. It's a committee. And also, this is something and honestly, I don't quite understand the connection. And maybe you can enlighten me, and I'll take your advice certainly with a grain of salt. But like the overnight rates is one thing, but the rates, almost all the rates that I'm looking at, we're looking at refis that 30-year resi rates. That's all tied to the treasuries, right? 10-year, 5-year, a lot of stuff we're looking at is tied to the 5-year. 5-year treasuries are interesting. That's the bond market. And if the bond market, like traditionally in the past, if people were getting skittish in equities, they would go to bonds, right? That's why it's balanced portfolio, and like they'd go to bonds because the US bonds are generally considered like risk-free. You get some return, not a lot, but it's risk-free. And if a lot of people are going into bonds and it's driving up the demand for bond, then the bond prices go up, which means the bond yields go down, and the bond yields go down. That's tied to, I'm going to get into all of the intricacies of the correlation, but basically, if people are going into US treasuries, it's lowering the treasury yield, which lowers the rates that like our stuff's tied to. A lot of times there'll be a spread off of the 5-year treasury or something, or 10-year treasury. And that's what we're getting, unless it's tied to SOFR or other things, which I've not seen any of that. Most of the stuff, everything we've been seeing is everything's tied to the treasuries. So the question is like, you could have the Feds lowering the overnight Fed rate. And I guess that maybe that, and I just don't understand the correlation literally. Like if they're lowering the treasury, or if they're lowering the overnight Fed rate, that does signal optimism. Investors get excited, but then they jump into equities. They get excited about equities. And a lot of people are kind of getting out of bonds globally because there's questions about the credit rating of United States Treasury bonds. The tariffs have spooked a lot of people out of the dollar. They've spooked a lot of people out of the bonds. So I don't really understand the correlation. Like in the past, it really relies on the U.S. bonds being attractive and considered risk-free, but I don't see that correlation anymore. So now I saw this too when the Feds actually did come out and finally start lowering rates. Like the dumbass I am, I call my banker and I'm like, all right, let's get my rates down, because I had a loan on an asset that they said they would adjust. She's like, yeah, rates aren't doing anything. I'm like, what are you talking about? I think it's gone down 50 basis points. Like, what are we doing? She's like, no, it's tied to the treasury, dumbass. I'm like, oh. So what happens if the Fed goes dovish based on, it gets politicized, which I think it is going to, and the overnight rate's lowered, but how is that going to affect the U.S. bonds?
I'm not 100% on the correlation either, but I do know that, if you think about this administration has been polarizing, I think we can all probably agree with that. We have half the country that's scared. You have half the country that's, maybe I'm not getting my numbers right, but simply stated, half the country is scared, half the country is really excited. And it's the same with the world, though. Multiple countries. And that affects bonds as well, right? Across, it's not just a national thing, it's international. So if you have folks that are scared and are questioning the credit rating of the United States, then potentially rates could go down, but the treasuries stay the same. Commercial real estate is based on the 5 and the 10-year treasury, usually, not always, like you said, but usually you could see those hold steady or do something different. And so that it does add complexity. It's not just like the Fed chair comes out and says, look, we're going down 50 basis points and you see a reduction on commercial loans, because it's not perfectly correlated. Now, I need to do some digging on that to understand what that correlation is, if there is correlation. But in the end, like you said, I think the more instability we have in the United States, the more people are nervous about our credit rating, and that affects bond prices, and that there is obviously a correlation between bond prices, the treasury, and commercial loans. So, in the end, it's such a hard prediction, and we always go back to the fundamentals of real estate. You can buy real estate at whatever rate and make it work if you're paying attention to the fundamentals. We've bought several properties with hard money where it's 10% or so, 10 to 12%. But we understand that the property is a great deal. There's great DSCR. There's a plan for reposition. We can refinance into lower rates, but we also stress test. So if we're getting a 6.5% loan, the property can handle 9.5, 10% plus. So I think it's like we can predict all day, but in the end, it always goes back to the fundamentals of real estate. Are you stress testing? Can your property handle higher rates? We just refinanced a property in Ormond Beach, and it was like I had this moment of panic because rates increased so much so quickly after we had bought it, right? And we were facing this refinance, and then I realized I'm like, oh man, but we underwrote that thing so conservatively that we can take a higher rate. We thought we were going to be refinancing probably like in the 5s, maybe the low 5s. We refinanced at 6.6. I don't know. I can't remember what our DSCR is, Trav, but it's like 1.6, 1.7, 1.8, somewhere in there. We have a super solid. And so because we underwrote it for the worst case scenario, we're completely fine. So I think it just comes down to we can try to understand this rate game, but really, really understand when you're buying a property, no matter what the rate is, make sure that it can withstand rates going in the wrong direction, 2, 3, 4 points. And I've been given shit by multiple brokers saying, oh, you're never going to find a deal like that. You're way too conservative, all these things. I'm like, yeah, well, maybe I'm too conservative for this moment in time. But when things change, I'm the one who survives. Our ship is still floating while multiple other ships are sinking. So I don't know if that answers the question. My gut is that we'll see a reduction in rates, a slight reduction in rates, maybe not into the fives, maybe the low sixes over time. But I think that's based on the pressure from the administration.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And I'll hold you to that. So hope you're right. Hope you're right. I mean, I do. I mean, obviously, I'm a real estate investor. I hope interest rates go down. I'll also tell you, when I bought my first house, it was over 8.5%. Like, a lot of young people, that's the other thing. They think this is like, oh my gosh, it's never been this high. Actually, no, it's been this high a lot and higher in the past. I don't see inflation changing. Inflation's going to keep going up because they keep printing money. I mean, like, the deficit's increasing, the value of the dollar's eroding. It's not going, inflation's going to continue to happen.
You can't always predict the rate game, but you can watch and sort of understand directionally where things might go. And when COVID hit and, the whole country went home, people weren't going to work. And soon after that, they started sending checks, like massive checks to individuals as well as companies. There's multiple programs to access capital. When you see something like that happen, then it's just an easy conclusion to realize that more money is coming into the system. And when more money comes into the system, it drives inflation, and inflation is combated with higher rates. So, when Trav and I saw this whole COVID situation play out, we actually went to market. We sold one of our properties. And I remember having the conversation, look, we need to take some chips off the table while we can sell high. Let's make sure that Cadia, our investment group, is capitalized. And we timed it very, very well, I should say, on the property in Washington that we sold. But we also saw the writing on the wall. There's no way you can put that much money in the system and not have inflation. Now, we were told that it was, what was the term they used for the inflation? It was like temporary, or there's a term they use and I just can't remember. Transient. I remember arguing with your banker, Trav, right? We were kind of going back and forth going like, how can this be in transient when so much money is going to the system? And I look back and I'm like, there was really nothing transient about it. We hit 8% plus inflation. Prices went up. Prices will never go down. That's just not the way it works. And so realize when money comes into the system at a very, very fast pace, you are going to see likely inflation and a rate increase.
Yeah, let's talk about that too. Let's talk about it. This is that conversation we were having off the air yesterday. And we were talking, because I'm like, well, how is, like, inflation's always going to happen. Think of it. Okay, well, you're going to have the middle class is just getting absolutely freaking decimated to where they're not going to be able to like pay rent. They're going to have to choose between like eating or paying rent, right? It's really sad. And I think Ken even mentioned this on our podcast recording yesterday, because I'm like, well, at some point you can't continue to, like, because you're like, we always say, okay, well, if you're an asset owner and you own real estate, you can always, as inflation happens, you can always raise rents to offset the cost of your operating expenses, and you can be okay. But my point was, and I was thinking, well, at some point, rents, like, you just can't raise rents higher for people. Like, you just won't be able to. They won't be able to pay for it. And you had a good response, which surprises me. Whenever you say something smart, I'm like, what? That's not Mitch.
You're surprised multiple times a day, though, is the thing. So anyway.
But you said, well, eventually, like, wages haven't kept up with inflation. And we're seeing that, right? We're in a really tough time for these people. Like, you have, people like one of the spouses is like a doctor, a general practitioner, and the other one's like a CPA. And they're like, they rely on both incomes, right? Just to like get by. And you're like, whoa, really? But wages haven't kept up. So I'm like, well, at some point you can't raise rents to offset your expenses, but expenses are going to keep going up. But you said, well, wages will eventually catch up because these companies, they're charging more for their products and services. And based on that, they're going to have to pay their people more, which then wages are going to go up. So like everything rises. It's just the timing piece of that. And so, because I'm ultimately like, at some point, this inflation thing is like, it's never going to stop. But I guess it's always going to continue, but wages are going to keep going up. Pretty soon, someday minimum wage is going to be $80 an hour, right? Because that's just the world we live in.
Yeah, I think like, if you look at minimum wage in certain states, in fact, I think I can't remember what state it was, but it was like, I saw this billboard for Walmart workers at like $25 an hour. And I thought, I remember when $25 an hour was like a lot of money. That was like, oh my gosh, that's a ton of money. And so wages have increased, and they will increase over time to compensate, because the whole system breaks if they don't. But wages as well as rents cannot increase at a rate of 8, 10, 15%. They just can't. And I say 8, 10, 15% because while they measure inflation with certain metrics, I think that the true inflation was much higher than 8%. I mean, if you look back, we have prices doubling over a couple of years. Like, it's not an 8% inflation in my mind. So like when the system's shocked that fast, employers cannot raise salaries that fast. We can't raise rents that fast. So the system's been shocked. It's been a tough couple years, but if they can keep inflation at 3%, then I think we can sort of restabilize this market, whether it's properties or businesses.
We talked about this yesterday. You're going to get more entitlement programs, like, because younger and younger people are voting. This is my next prediction. I don't care about the time right now. I'm actually curious about this. Younger and younger people are voting, right? You see what's happening in New York. You see, this self-proclaimed socialist in New York that wants to freeze rents. We're seeing rent control and a lot of different. I want to get in the rent control thing, but the last point I'll make about that on inflation is pretty soon the middle class can't afford to eat, or they can't afford to pay their rent. There's going to be more entitlement programs. There's going to be more government subsidies, which means more printing of money, which means more inflation, it's like this vicious cycle. My question to you is, politically, like our country is so divided, and we invest in landlord-friendly states, which are typically conservative red states, because they sort of let the market handle itself. Whereas you've got a lot of your coastal states, like you've got Pennsylvania, which when we own property there, we thought it was more of a purple state. It's going real blue. I mean, there's housing legislation where they don't want it. You can't raise rents more than like 2 or 4%, which would absolutely cripple real estate investors, especially when you have inflation that's, even whether it's public or not, it's outpacing that big time. Investors are going to flee out of that state. No investment's going to go into real estate. You're going to see blighted properties. You see, this guy in New York who's proposing a rent freeze. We've got Oregon, which was, I think, the first state, which I live in Oregon, first statewide rent control. You see that in Washington State. You see a lot of this happening right now. What is your prediction with landlord tenant laws? Because some people, the politicians, they have to make decisions and push legislation that sort of supports their voter base, and their voter base are younger people that were sold a bag of shit, which is the public education, go to college, get a good job, live a good life. That's not happening anymore. And so they're going to be pissed off, and they're going to want rent control. They're going to want all of these things to happen on a state by state or maybe a national level. Like, where do you see a lot of this happening? Where do you see rent control? Where do you see landlord tenant laws? Like, we know our strategy is to continue to buy in red states, but like, what do you see? Do you see this actually happening in some of these states?
I think in some of the states that it will happen. And I think it'll take a number of years to realize the mistake. If I had to predict it, I think blue is going to get more blue and red's going to get more red, because you also have people migrating. When a state is very, very blue and you're in the red mindset, you move. There's a lot of, you vote with your feet. So, and we've seen that. We've seen massive movement, say, like out of California into Texas and the Tennessees and the Arkansas and Missouri and into the red. Now, if you're in a red state and you don't agree with those policies, then you're going to move to blue and you're going to vote blue. So this is a guess, right? But I think that blue goes more blue and red goes more red. And you see a division in our country in the way that we think about policy. Now, I can't imagine some of these blue states holding on to those policies for multiple years because of the destruction. Like Portland, for example, I would guess that pendulum is going to swing someday. I hope it. I actually love Portland. I think Portland's a beautiful city with the wrong leadership. But like at some point, you would think that just as humans, you make a certain decision and then you look at what happens, you look at the result, you would think that the vote would change, that people would start to say, hey, maybe, it's even like the legalizing drugs in Portland, that's since gone away.
For the record, I always thought that was a great idea. Just a great idea.
Yeah, I know you did. So we've seen that go away though, because they've realized, even though, it's a blue vote, they've realized, hey, like maybe giving out free needles and like legalizing meth is not the way. So I think it comes to housing too. Like at some point, you've got to ask the question, why is our housing stock eroding? Why are prices going down? Why are investors fleeing? So, but that could be a multi-year cycle.
We need more investors. No, you actually villainized all of them and ran them out of the state. So I guess you're going to have to go back to government housing, and that always works out well. Well, you mentioned migration too. I mean, what is your prediction on migration? I mean, we're you see people that have traditionally liked to go into the Austins of the world. There's always been these kind of hot spots across the country that always seem to boom, and then like they crash and burn. There's been a lot of multifamily in Austin in trouble, certain markets and a lot of markets in Texas that are in trouble. Like, what do you see in migration patterns? You mentioned political migration, but I personally think, I'm asking you that I'm answering my own question. I'm the host of the podcast. I'm the CEO. I make the rules. You just have to follow along. Here's what I think. I think that, and we talked about, you know where I'm going with this because we talked about this off air the other day. I think investing in areas that are low cost of living areas are really smart. Talked to Ken about it yesterday. The cost of living is just going to go up and up and up. People can't afford housing anymore. They can't afford, $2,000-$3,000 a month rents. They can't forget ever buying a house ever again. Some people, not to sound like a doomsdayer, but like there's just not been enough construction. Like there's just such a shortage of housing supply. And I think that might be like for me, like owning these 200 units in Oklahoma City, part of me is like, man, I hate Oklahoma City. Sorry, if you're listening to this and you're from Oklahoma City, I'm sure you love it. Apparently they've got great steak and all that. I hate it. I'm from Oregon. I like water. I like waterfalls. I like mountains and stuff like that. But at the same time, I think, well, it's not bad because like rents are pretty cheap out there. I mean, you're talking like $1,000 a month for a 2-bedroom or $1,200, which compared to other markets, it's just so much more. And so I kind of like being in Oklahoma because Oklahoma City is kind of like maybe kind of some people look at it as an alternative to some markets in Texas, which are overpriced. So I like the fact that maybe people are going to start migrating. We like the Midwest. We like areas in the Midwest because cost of living is so cheap. Someone's going to be like, I can't live in Oregon anymore, or I can't live in California anymore, or Denver or Austin because I can't afford to live. Like life is miserable. I'd rather live in a flat brown state, but like sleep at night and be able to like, send my kids to the right school and like go out to eat and like live my life. And so I feel like you're going to start seeing a lot more economic migration as well.
Yeah, I think, the digital side has changed things too. And so you have a couple different, you have multiple variables, but the two variables that I think are interesting is, are you a physical worker or are you a digital worker? So if you're a digital worker, you're likely making more money and you're also you don't need to be in proximity to your work. You're not driving in traffic to a manufacturing facility. Your work is your computer, your laptop and your phone. So digital workers, I think where they want to live is they want to live in places that are geographically unique. And we see that in Hood River, White Sand, where we are a lot. I was talking to this girl and she's like, well, I work for Facebook. And I thought, it's so interesting. She works for Facebook. It's in California. It's in the city. It's a mess down there, but yet she's in this geographically unique location. So I think that your white collar digital workers are moving to places where they can live a life where they can work digitally, but they can go play and enjoy the outdoors. So that's one migration into smaller towns that have a geographic attributes that offer, great lifestyle. Then you have the other side of the coin, the physical workers. I think physical workers are, like you said, they're looking for low income, respectable housing, safe areas that are in close proximity to work. So close proximity to work being like manufacturing plants, could be oil field. I don't like oil fields, but could be, retail. So I think it's like, are you a physical worker? Or are you a digital worker? And that doesn't work perfectly because you have doctors who are physical workers, right? It doesn't work perfectly, but we've seen multiple small towns, small areas and geographically unique areas that don't have a lot of jobs change dramatically and see huge population of white collar, people who are wealthy move there and change the area. And our area is exactly that example. So I almost see this reality of like these huge centers, these huge cities that are full of lower income workers that are physical, go into work every day. And then on the outskirts, multiple small areas that are geographically unique and basically populated with digital workers that click buttons and control the entire city. And so no longer is it like, you're making a ton of money and you want to live downtown Portland. That's not where you want to be, or downtown Seattle or downtown LA or downtown. You're looking for somewhere that's respectable and where you can enjoy your life. So anyway, there's a lot of pieces to it, but I definitely see that those two variables playing out.
Yeah, you mentioned the intercity migration, suburb migration. I mean, we've seen that pendulum swing back and forth for years where you saw there was a general migration. People, like younger people, wanted to live downtown. They wanted to live in a condo. They wanted to be close to coffee shops and clubs. And like, you're young. You're single and you're looking to mingle. And I felt like that was sort of nationally, like that was a general trend. Some inner cities were like just total shitholes, especially if they got hit like hard, like Detroit and some of these, maybe these auto manufacturing cities. But generally speaking, you saw that. And then of course, COVID happened. And then everything went to hell and everybody was moving out of the inner cities to the suburbs. And now I was actually reading an article where it's a mixed bag. You have some cities, like I think probably in more red states, where younger people are moving back to the inner cities. They like that. They like that vibe. But you also see some cities, specifically like Portland is one of them, where I don't know if Portland's ever going to come back. I mean, I'm sure it will. Because someone's like, when are you going to start investing in downtown Portland? Like, shouldn't you do that? I mean, prices are really cheap. Dude, I have a good buddy of mine. He works in tech, makes great money. He had to foreclose on his house because he owned a condo. It was a condo. Like he every single, like so many of the condos every night got broken into. There was drug. That's when, Portland lost its mind. And so like Portland leadership has actually destroyed a lot of lives through foreclosures. And there's a lot of businesses that are going bankrupt. I mean, because the leadership has turned their back on people. And so anyway, that's another thing to track. I think I would track, for people that are listening, and we'll wrap up this podcast, track sort of interstate trend migration, affordable housing states or states that are cheaper to live in. Like you said, if I can make several $100,000 a year and work remotely for Facebook or something like that, understand that relationship, destination areas, because the asset classes that you buy kind of need to match probably where the demand's going to be. Understand sort of the flow of inner city to the suburbs and what that looks like. I think the country's on the move. And I think having knowledge of that is important, obviously. But we've bought mobile home parks and just super steady eddy areas that were under optimized. You optimize and you make a lot of money. So also understand the deal fundamentals.
I was reading about understanding population trends. And I think in the end, if you look at, I'll tie this to money printing because I think that's a big topic. The more money you print, the richer some people will get and the poorer other people get. And there's the haves and the have-nots. That creates an even more polarized left and right, blue and red. The blue feel like they're ripped off and they want more handouts and they feel like they've been ripped off, which they have in some sense. And the red want to protect their money. I mean, and Ray Dalio talks about this. So the more they print the money, the more polarized the country gets and the more people move. One of the things that I thought was interesting was looking at one-way U-Haul trends and data, because that's a leading indicator of migration. And we should actually start doing this, Trav. But like before the census data comes out, you can study an area looking at what are people moving their belongings, like literally moving their families via U-Haul data or Penske data. So there's some cool like leading indicators that we should probably dig into even more. But in the end, I think that we are going to see a lot of migration as the country gets more and more polarized and the left and the right disagree.
Yeah, don't get me going on that. That actually gets me even more nervous. I mean, Ray Dalio talks about, inflation and the printing of money and the devaluing of currency as being sort of the leading edge of unrest, civil unrest, whether it's an internal civil war or whether it's an implosion from the inside and countries get essentially attacked from the outside, not to freak people out. But it always starts with divisiveness, right? Whether they're too distracted fighting amongst themselves, a third party adversary comes in and attacks. And it's like I think we read some of the Ray Dalio stuff a few years ago, and we're like, oh man, that's interesting. I could see that happening. Now I'm like, whoa. Every time I look at the news, people are so freaking mad about everything. Right. I don't care what's happening in the world. There's a protest, especially in Portland. They protest about, the color orange.
Sorry, I was going to say also, like, I think I understand it though. I think like we were talking about, like the social contract's kind of been broken. And I talk about the red, the blue, the political, whatever. And I really I have empathy for both sides in a lot of ways, because there are a lot of people who follow the rules. They're like, look, I'm going to go to high school, go to college, I'm going to get a job, whatever. And now they're strapped. And they're frustrated because every single year, even when they get a promotion, they get a demotion via the buying power of their dollar. And so it's sad that that's the way this system works. And it's understandable why a lot of people feel disenfranchised.
Well, yeah, they're angry. It's like, I have a college degree and I'm driving Uber shifts on the weekend. I can't see my family because I have, this is bullshit. And then they see people getting absurdly wealthy, asset owners that are playing the tax game, and people that own assets that are getting wealthier and wealthier and have time freedom because they've disconnected sort of our inputs to pay real estate investors, I mean, that's why we have this podcast. Not that we agree or disagree with any of it, but real estate's a fantastic vehicle. It's a great equalizer of this country to build wealth and to build passive income and to do it without having to have, a master's degree, a PhD. I mean, we could have a completely different podcast to talk about the breakdown of the educational system and colleges and how they've let students down. And yeah, so people are pissed off. But at the end of the day, though, is like people can't afford to live. And the middle class is getting vaporized. You've got the haves and the have-nots, and then you have civil unrest. And go look at social media, go look at the news. Like, people are protesting across the country. People are mad about a myriad of topics, and they're pissed off globally, but I think a lot of it stems to this, like you said, their dissatisfaction with their station of life, the fact that they were sold a bag of goods, and the fact that the social contract that they were promised has been broken. And so where does that leave you as a real estate investor? I don't know. Like, I know, buy beans and bullets, I guess. I don't know. Understand the trends, but at some point, there's not a lot you can do about it.
Well, this has been fun. Why don't we wrap it up there? I love talking about these issues, but it all comes back to buy on the fundamentals and understand the fundamentals. Because as long as you can hold real estate over time, real estate has the tailwind, and real estate in the history of our country has done well if you're able to hold. And holding is based on the fundamentals. It's based on cash flow. It's based on being able to service debt and take cash flow for properties in any market cycle.
Hey, if you've actually made it to the end of this podcast and Mitch hasn't completely bored the shit out of you, I'd recommend go get our book, 0 to 100 Units on Amazon. It's on Audible. Check us out at 0to100tribe.com. Zero, ZEROTO, the number 100tribe.com. If you like this, you're interested, again, read our book and you like listening to our podcast, you might be somebody that would be interested in our elite mastermind. In fact, we're going to jump off and spend the next couple of hours with our elites. We have some elites having a tremendous amount of success. They started with us 18 months, 24 months ago with 0 units. They're buying commercial assets. They're creating wealth and cash flow, and they're learning how this thing works. I'd say it's not easy. Like, a lot of people that don't succeed in this game is they think they could have lifestyle design and time freedom while they're trying to build a portfolio. And I think the people that realize that that's absolutely not the case, the exact opposite. It's fast action. It's fast education. It's mindset shifts. It's grinding it out, sending a letter of intent, running numbers, picking asset classes, following what we call the R1 framework. They realize that time freedom comes later, but like, you got to put the work in on the way there. And we love teaching and masterminding with people that do it. Plus, you meet some great people. So come join us at 0to100tribe.com. And wow, that was one hell of a podcast. Thanks for tuning in. And for Mitchell England, I'm Travis Dillard. We will talk to you next time.